So we are beginning to record for Tuesday, September 19th. This is the reading group on Iamblichus's Egyptian Mysteries. And Ryan is with us now, and hopefully we'll have a few others join. But he and I can certainly begin the discussion. And thankfully we're recording and we can disseminate this out to others. Should they wish to listen. So I wanted to start this out, Ryan, with a question, kind of just a summary of what chapter 4 brings us to. So last time we found that Iamblichus is asserting that there's a type of intuitive awareness of the gods, even another reality. And here in chapter 4, he's beginning to describe what the entities that inhabit this reality are. So he starts to describe what they are and how we can define them, of course, in opposition to Porphyry, who seems to have asked the wrong questions, as always. We do find out from Iamblichus that they are essences of varying degrees, and there's a hierarchy of the gods, daimons, heroes, and souls. And we do get into some of the Neoplatonic metaphysics, and I'm always leery of those types of systems which start to try to impose some type of categorization or some type of systematic way of looking at these realities. So my question is, does this type of description of these beings really work for someone from a modern perspective or practitioner?
Well, I think it's interesting because though I agree where like you start to get that systematic sort of explanation of theology, you run into some like issues of imposition, like you said. I'm basing this. I finally got the chance to crack open Greg Shaw this weekend, Theurgy and the Soul. So I'm taking up some of this thinking from that. But something that Greg says is that the separation from the body, from the material to the divine, and his argument that Iamblichus is also saying this, somewhat it created a situation where there was no tangible sort of piece of the divine to grab onto, which in his mind ultimately kind of destroyed pagan cult activity in the 3rd century or 4th century. And I see this as it's ironic because though I definitely understand why like the categorization is problematic in certain respects, I also think that it allows for a greater sort of a greater, I guess, delineation of the divine, which allows us to access it in a little bit more of a ready way. You have these different levels. No, you don't necessarily have to just go directly to the one. You know what I mean? Like you have multiple levels of reality, which create that tiered system. It's like a set of stairs that you can walk up. So though I think that in terms of the theology itself, it, maybe doesn't have as much value for a modern practice. Well, I'm not even going to say it doesn't have enough value for a modern practitioner, but it creates a path, I think. Mm-hmm. So although the concretization of these things, seems like an imposition, in my mind, it's more of an opening up. It allows for like a greater understanding of the things that are closer to you in the divine.
So it's kind of a way of giving us a latch to hold on to while we begin to explore these realities.
Yeah, exactly. A latch,
That's an
or
interesting way.
even like a pull, a magnet almost, that allows us to get in that, to start ascension, I suppose.
Now, the reason for this, of course, is that he talks about the fact that the body, well, the soul is in its descent is farther away from the good or the divine than otherwise it would be, like in a system of like Plotinus. So we have to, as because the soul is the last stage, well, above matter anyway, pure matter, but the last stage in the emanation from the good. It's still separated, and it requires these tools, almost these entities that we must call upon in order to begin to ascend again. And so it's helpful that he starts to give us an idea, places them in their proper order, right?
Right. And I do get the sense that, though, like, obviously some of this is, I mean, all of it, I guess, is based on like a tradition of Neoplatonic thought. A lot of, in my mind, especially as someone that, you know, is a practitioner, semantics become tough. You know what I mean? Because it allows you to give words to the ineffable, which I think is entirely necessary, though it might not be exactly true or correct in, you know, how it's spoken about, or actual, like, giving these things names, you know, whether or not that is their true name, I think is irrelevant, because it gives us like a framework by which to understand it, which gives us then a, like you say, something to grab onto. Also, hey King, what's going on?
He can't hear us. I'm not sure why. King, can you hear us? There he is. Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Can you hear us now?
You're on mute, eh?
He's on mute. I don't think he realizes he has to click the microphone in the room itself. It's like, yeah. I tried to unmute him. Let me see if there's anything I can do here. See. There's really nothing I can do for him.
I mean, I guess it is what it is.
He joined the last time, and it was fine. Oh, he's on mobile. Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay, well.
So we'll continue. Hopefully, he can get that taken care of.
Yeah. Sounds good.
So, sorry, I lost the train of thought. So, I mean, you mentioned that this is part of. I just wanted to make sure about how innovative Iamblichus really is here. This is something new, and the Neoplatonic tradition is, for him, represents a way of looking at Plato, and yeah, that whole tradition of looking at Plato, looking at Aristotle, and looking at Greek philosophy from the past. But now he is being innovative, in the first of this school, if you will, within Neoplatonism, which sees that we can that we are somehow fallen from oneness with the one. whereas Plotinus always taught that the soul is continuously with the one, and that there's like an illusion that we have that we're somehow separate from the one. For Iamblichus, we indeed are separate from the one. And so this is his innovation of saying, okay, well, we are separate from the one, but we can get back to them, as you're saying. I mean, I'm only reiterating in the latter part what you're saying, but we should also remain, aware of how really innovative Iamblichus is being in this. Um, and so his setting out this hierarchy, his hierarchy of emanations, is really important for us, as you were saying earlier, for us to be able to get back to union with the one. And how we do that comes out in his description of these entities, which I think is really important, right? Because then that gives us a handle to begin to say, okay, well, wait a minute, how do I contact a daimon? How do I contact a hero? How do I contact a daimon? And what does that even mean to contact them?
Right. And I mean, like, I hope that that's a question that we can bring more light to, like, moving forward in the work,
Yeah. I mean, we do get some indication.
Uh-oh. Now I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep, we're good.
Yep. So if we look at, that's an interesting point, because if you look at chapter 5, he begins to detail how this access to the diamonds begins to take place. If we look at where he begins, third paragraph, where he's already said, okay, well, he's defined where the soul is and how the soul is kind of at the bottom of this hierarchy. He begins to talk about, well, okay, what are the place of the heroes, and then what are the place of the daimons? And he begins to give us an idea, if you will, of the way that we can begin to access them, especially when we move on, where if you look in the middle of that third paragraph, it is not a primary initiator of action, but submits itself to the service of the goodwill of the gods it follows. This is the daimons, revealing in action their invisible goodness, while likening itself to it, producing creations which are in its image, giving expression to the ineffable, and causing the formless to shine forth in forms. To me, this begins to sound something like magic, bringing out onto the level of manifest discourse that which is superior to all reasoning, and receiving already that degree of participation in beauty which is innate to them, while providing and conveying it unstintingly to the classes of being that come after it. So he's saying that the daimons are being somehow empowered by the gods, because they have access to this ability to emulate what the gods are giving them. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, very quickly, it really rings to, I'm sure I have brought this up before, and I'm sure I will bring it up again, but, like,
Yeah.
to me, that's all as above, so below, like, you've got, like, a really good reflection of that concept within that statement about the daimons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and I would say that reflects his conveying of the Egyptian, the way of Hermes, that he's incorporated into his so-called system. He's really has brought that. What he's done is taken both the Chaldeans and the Egyptian philosophies and magical systems, and begun to synthesize them into more of this Neoplatonic way of thinking of things. But but you do see the remnants of those systems themselves in what he's describing. So as above, so below, for sure, is part of the um, Egyptian way or the Hermetic way of thinking. And he gives more detail as well. Hi, Farjana. Welcome.
Hi. Sorry I'm late.
No problem. We're in the middle of it where we've actually gotten to the fourth paragraph or so in chapter 5.
Okay.
We are recording, so you can hear what we had gotten to this point. But
Okay, thank you.
currently what we've gotten to is how does Iamblichus's categorization and his delineation and definition of these entities, how does that work? And what is he saying that we can actually somehow relate to, being, people living in the modern world?
Yeah.
And we've gotten to the point where we've talked about, well, why is this necessary? Why is it necessary that we have this hierarchy? Why is there this hierarchy? And for him, it's because we've fallen as souls, as human souls.
Mm-hmm.
We've descended into the body, and therefore we don't have immediate access to the goodness that is superior to everything, all things in this world or any other world. We just don't have access to that anymore in our soul because it's fallen. Whereas Plotinus would say, well, no, we do have access to it because we're there all the time. For Iamblichus, we really have fallen almost as low as you can get, and then we need to find and have a way to ascend back to the one. And the daimons, he's pointing to the daimons as being those entities which we can propitiate and ask for help in getting to these, at least beginning to ascend. And he starts to describe, well, who are these daimons and how is it possible that they can actually do this for us? And he says, well, at the beginning, and this is going to be a theme running throughout the book, which is really it's the gods. The gods are giving the daimons. If they have any efficacy, it's because of the gods. But because the daimons do reflect what the gods are conveying to them, we can make use of that either in our prayers and also in any rituals that we somehow have access to. And so let me stop there and see if Ryan, you wanted to add anything, and Farjana, if you wanted to ask any questions for clarification.
No, I mean I think that covers it pretty well. Like the one thing that I kind of keep coming back to, and I know that the answer is like it creates a connection which allows, and that like this is a direct issue that Porphyry has as well. Creates the connection that allows for the gods to interface with you. My like biggest sticking point with this still is then like why do the daimons, why do the heroes, etc. Like why does this work for them? Which I'm sure we'll be getting into as the work moves on. Anyway, but yeah.
So would that mean like because of our falling, we don't have access to those gateways? I mean, that's like the easiest way that I can understand it. We don't have access to those gateways anymore. but we can open those gateways and then therefore get the help of the beings that we need, which then gives us access, to climb, Jacob's ladder or whatever it is. Like, is that the same idea?
I think is your question more like what do they get out of it?
Mhm.
No. I mean, my question is
Like why would
is
they?
it, because that's kind of how I'm understanding it, like, from my kind of perspective and the research that I've done. So is that kind of what he's saying? We don't have access to certain gateways anymore, but we can open them, and once we do, we have access to these beings that help us to ascend higher. Is that the same concept? That's my question.
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what he's saying from our point of view. But I think Ryan's question was, so then why would the ones on the other side, what did they get out of it? So if they're
Right.
being positioned
Exactly.
above and we're below and they're dragging us up, why would
Yeah.
they do that? What do they
Yeah.
want
I
to do
mean,
that for?
I mean, I would understand that as that's their job, maybe, because maybe they don't have anything to fulfill or anything else but to do that.
That's a great that's a great way of putting it. That is their job. Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
But Brian,
that's
does
it.
that help? Or Ryan, does that answer in any possible way what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
asking?
totally. Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I mean, I know that we discussed like this concept a couple weeks ago about the love of the gods, and I know that that's like a very Christianized framework, but I think it works. You know what I mean? Like the reason why is because they want us to succeed in this task, and they want unity to, exist, I guess. But anyways, yeah, no, thanks.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, and love is a part of it. I mean, I don't know. People talk about love, and unfortunately for me anyway, my thought patterns when it comes to love are tainted, if you will, by the romantic concept of love. And I think it's important sometimes to realize that there are other ways of looking at love that don't always jibe with the modern way of thinking of love. It's for me, it's nostalgic. It's, this nice, warm feeling and all of that stuff. But there's also a sense of duty in this love. There's a sense of overwhelming awe and wonder in this type of love that I think that we should also be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, in the Sufi tradition, they classify love under, I think, 10 main hierarchies. Like there's levels to it, and then the highest one is called hub, which means hub Allah, which means the love of God, love of Allah. So you get to the highest one, but then there are different types. But that type of love is different. Like it's different from anything that I've ever experienced in the worldly sense. That's
I also remember. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, carry on. I forgot what I was going to say. Sorry.
I was just going to say, just a similar comparison too is, I mean, one that springs to mind is that you have this idea of bodhisattvas in Buddhism too, but it's a little different, and I think it goes together with this question that someone asked last week that I don't remember who asked this, but someone asked basically in this book, are these beings, did they start from a lower position and get to their higher position from there, or did they start from a higher position and kind of get projected down, but they didn't sort of get projected down all the way and then raised back up? Oh, sorry, I'm on a train. Can you hear the train voice, or could I keep talking?
Go ahead. You're good.
Okay. But so you have this contrast, I think, where the idea of a bodhisattva is someone who used to be a being, like used to be a human or a deluded being in some way, and they raised themselves up into that position from there. They got freer than they started, and that's sort of where their obligation comes from, a little bit to other beings, is because they also used to be there, and they're helping everyone else out, sort of along with them. But this seems to be a different concept, where these other levels, it doesn't sound like they ever used to be humans necessarily, and they were raised up from that. It sounds like more that they started that way. So that level of kind of obligation or connection to the beings below you doesn't seem like it's quite as strong, I guess, which is what leads to this kind of question of like,
I
why would
think
they want to do it?
hmm that's a great way of putting it into perspectives. And if just it kind of hits me that if there were an analogy within Buddhism, it might be in Tibetan Buddhism with the different types of levels of gods and goddesses that they have. I don't know how far to take that, but there might be an analogy there.
Oh, kind of another question branching off that. Do the daimons know what it is to be human? Is that part of daimonic existence, having an understanding, a deeper understanding of the levels beneath? Or are we unique in our perceptions of materiality, I guess?
Hmm.
And is there a
Stumped y'all with
difference?
that one, did I?
And
No,
is
that's
there
a
a
great
difference between
question.
Yeah.
There does
Sorry.
seem to be, doesn't there? There does seem to be a unique reason to being human out of all of the other creation.
Well, if I
It
could
seems
Yeah, I
throw
mean,
this, yeah, go ahead.
to,
I was
seems to
just
be
going
the
to say, I
hardest
mean,
one.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Farzana.
No, sorry, I was just saying it seems to be the hardest one. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I look at, again, other traditions and like, especially this idea, and again, like this works very well in a Christianizing framework, but like that man is made in God's image. And I mean, like, I think most of us that are that are interested in like esoteric thought and philosophy are probably on board with the idea that the image that we are created in is the mind, not the body. But then like that in and of itself suggests to me that there is a point to materiality, that there is like a process by which we have to ascend. So yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer to the question, but I just think it's interesting, especially if we're trying to, contact these beings. What level are we contacting them at? Are we contacting them as humans? Are we contacting them through our connection to the divine? Like,
Well, the purification will be making our connection to the divine clearer, and we can only connect with them when we purify ourselves. And ultimately, I think we would be reflections of the divine, a divine reality that we have no conception of, because any access to that world is being occluded, if you will, by the materiality that we live in. So, I mean, but it's a great question. Is there something unique about the human experience which is important for either for the divine itself to see come to being? I think in the Hermetic way, I think that they would say there is, but it's very limited.
Yeah. I think that what you said one step before that might answer the question that we had before too, though. I think that if we are saying there is this through line that goes all the way right down into the human, and that's the basis of this relationship between these various levels, that's why you would want to. That's why they would, these other levels would elevate the human level, because there is this through line, and it's the same. It's sort of you're all related in this way. You all have this common nature, and that might be enough. I think that probably answers that question. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Well, I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but sorry, Farzana, I don't want to give too much away, but it does seem, at least from some of the readings, that the whole purpose of creation itself is to save the human soul. but
Mm.
why save the human soul? Is the question, I guess. Why,
Mm.
Well, it's
why
also
would
like,
they want to do that?
why put us in a position in which salvation is even necessary?
Hmm.
The way that I kind of came to any kind of conclusion with that was because it had already happened. So it wasn't like God put us there, is because things intervened with that holiness or purity, that it became contaminated and it had already happened. So the only way back is the purification process. So there is an individual one and then there's the collective one.
Actually, kind of like brings up another point that I wanted to get into with this one. Because like I would say, at least based on our limited reading so far, as well as like commentaries I've interacted with in the past, like Iamblichus does not believe in or like give validity to evil divine beings. Like there's no demons. There's daimons, but there's no demons. Am I correct about that?
That's what Gregory Scholl says, yeah.
Yeah. So
Which is different than obviously either the Hermetic way or the Chaldean way of thinking.
right, and from what I understand, Porphyry as well too, right? Like Porphyry was all about,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, there's definitely demonic influences. Although I'm
yeah,
trying to think it's somehow I mean all of this is Chaldean that, there are rituals that you will be able to hold, but you have to protect yourself during these rituals from the demons. Otherwise they will attach themselves to you.
right, right. So from there, then, like, is this demonic influence, I guess, so to speak, what creates the separation? What creates the gulf?
I think there has to be if we think of it in a bigger way, let's say, there's a purpose which we can't even begin to understand until we actually begin to progress up the scale. There's a purpose to creation which is beyond, let's say, our limited way of understanding it at this point. And that's why creating the human soul was necessary. It is to bring about this other grander purpose to creation, which again, unification with the one. They do talk about cycles. They do talk about, cycles of tens of thousands of years. It has to continue through, and there's all of everything has to play itself out to when you get to the end, everything is repurified, and then the whole thing begins over again. But I do think that there is a purpose. It's just that we have to begin to think of it as something beyond our grasp, at least until we actually begin to move up the up the ladder.
Yeah, can I just ask a question? Um, doesn't it take a lifetime to even get anywhere near the higher levels? Like,
Well, that's
doesn't
what
it take?
Iamblichus says. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
he
So by the
agrees. Yeah,
time we get anywhere,
yeah,
maybe
exactly. Right.
I'd be dead. Like, I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, it seems like an impossible task. But if it does take like a lifetime, does it? Do some people start on? I mean, there's definitely different levels that different people start at. Like,
Hmm.
some people have access to a lot of these places or areas than other people. Does that give some people a great disadvantage? Do you think,
Well,
like,
yeah, I mean, he does talk about, and the Neoplatonists in general do talk about reincarnation, and
mm,
that those who have attained a very high level, Iamblichus talks about this as well, that those who have attained the very high level do, once they're dead, they go to live with the gods for a while, or their god, because we each have this attachment to this specific god. they go to live with their God, have glimpses of the ultimate reality, participate in the actual process of creation, this continuing creation that's ongoing. And then after a certain time, they say, or they're told, or they're given the mission of being reincarnated, coming back to this earth and helping other people. It's almost like the bodhisattva idea,
Mm,
where you're coming back to this earth and you're going to help others to raise themselves and ascend above.
right, right. Wow, why would you come back?
Well, that's the thing. Why would you come back unless you have? But see, that's where it's a totally different frame of mind. Why would the demons want to participate in this? Because they have this overwhelming sense of the reality and what the purpose of reality is that they didn't have before, and they see the importance of this reality that they want to bring about and they want to make manifest.
Also,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, also, I think if we're looking at things from like a Platonian framework, and actually, I understand that it kind of goes against some of Iamblichus's thoughts, but like if we are undescended, then perhaps they want to come down because they recognize we are all connected. We are all part of the one. So in order for unification to occur, everybody needs to be elevated. Like it's necessary for the cycle to continue. That's the way I see it anyway.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting about one of Farjana's comments in the Sufi way, that there are two aspects to love. One is individual and one is communal.
Mm,
That I find fascinating. That we're not just talking about our own individual salvation. We are talking
yeah,
about the salvation of all beings.
yeah. And that's where the idea of responsibility comes from, I guess. Like, it's not just about me and myself, it's about me and others. It's always about that. And we can't, if you really look at it, you can't separate the two. You can't do this without wanting to help yourself and others. Like, it comes with it.
It's like, why would Iamblichus have written any of this down if he didn't believe,
Yeah,
that like it was necessary to teach and for others to be elevated? Like, why would you not then just sit in your study and read and write philosophy?
So do you think we've all come back to help others, like, not in a egotistical way, but in a way that there's something that I see maybe other people don't see. And of course I have to do it for myself, but I'm very interested in others. Like, I care about others. We're all in it together. Really, we're all in the same boat. I wonder.
Well, I mean, for me, like, I think that was one of the reasons why I was interested in doing something like this at all, because like I recognize that like I don't necessarily just on my own have the tools necessary. Like we are all on the journey together. And I think our biggest tools are the 7 billion other pieces of the one that exist on this earth. That's the way I see it anyway. So like, I think that probably we are on, like, we do have a responsibility, I suppose, as people looking for ascension to help spread it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why he starts within traditional religious rituals and practices, and then begins to move on into the more esoteric aspects, because he is concerned about community. He is concerned about the old traditions that have held everyone together and that hold people together because we believe in the same thing. But then that is only if we're in the know, if we're understanding, that's a stepping stone. That's kind of a gateway, to use Farshana's term. That's a gateway into further moving up the ladder. I'm stealing from her metaphors all over the place. Thanks, Farshana.
Yeah.
Which I think is a great. I think is this whole idea that we can somehow find a way of thinking which not only incorporates obviously the individual but also the communal, which is really going to be hard in the contemporary world. And I would go back to my question before about, how relevant is this? Like, if we're going to think that there are literally these entities, daimons, gods, heroes in another reality, how can we even begin to think that, given our modern temper of mind, which is so skeptical and doesn't even, in many regards, well, it's skeptical at the same time that it's superstitious, right? Currently we live in a situation where we have this really skeptical, scientific, materialistic way of thinking, which seems to be diminishing every day. And then we have this very superstitious way of thinking, which to these wild, crazy conspiracy theories. It would seem, okay, well, the guys who believe in the conspiracy theories, hey, they'd be willing to listen to this idea that there are other entities because they believe they do believe these things. But wait a minute, they also, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with that if I go that direction. Whereas if I go to the materialistic direction, then there's life, living for myself, getting whatever I can, and screw everyone else, literally and not literally. Perhaps not literally.
I guess that's the difficulty of the modern age. It's hard.
I see. It's funny because I like obviously like the materialistic worldviews there, the the like scientific skepticisms there, but I see a lot, and it doesn't matter what like political orientation people are coming from, what sort of like end goal they have for life is, but I see like a ton of what I would consider to be faith-based thinking that's still present within our society. And I mean, I guess you could call it superstition, call it like faith-based thinking, but I think about the way that like social theory, for example, has really exploded as a framework for understanding, where it's like it reflects an interpretation of reality. It doesn't necessarily reflect reality, but I think that people often conflate those two things. So I actually see it as like, I mean, maybe this is what you were saying, where like this is changing, that like scientific materialistic way of looking at the world maybe doesn't have the staying power that we think that it does, because especially when we're living in a situation now where facts that we are like avenues of knowledge that we had assumed are valid are it's quickly becoming apparent that there's some like major flaws in how information is communicated through those avenues. Like obviously I'm talking about online discourse and stuff. And like even like news media and stuff like that. And I think that like opens a pathway for people to start exploring these ideas on a deeper level. Because like a lot of the, be it like social theory, economic theory, those things that we see today, they do explain reality in an esoteric way. And it just takes one extra step then to start spiritualizing it, in my mind. So like I don't see, I mean maybe don't see it as the same. I'm not as hopeless I guess, in thinking that, people aren't going to come to these conclusions. I mean, maybe I'm just hopelessly naive, but that's my feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I do definitely agree with it as especially as time moves on, like 10, 20 years ago, when I used to talk about this, nobody was really interested. Whereas now, a lot of it in conversation, and it doesn't seem to be in this context as such, but it's there now than what it was before. So that makes me quite hopeful. It makes me quite happy because I recognize it. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for. And I think that will happen more and more. I think it will gain momentum because it has to.
In a short-term sense, I think these things go in cycles, and also, like, I also think that it's just a mode of thinking that we can't really get away from, even in the times in the cycle when it seems like nobody's interested in it. I remember seeing something on Twitter one time where someone made this claim that I thought was very provocative, which is basically the same way that someone like Iamblichus would say, "Oh, you've been taken over by the daimon of anger or the daimon of happiness or whatever." Like, this is basically the way that pop science talks about neurotransmitters. People with no understanding at all of neuroscience will still say things like, this gives me so much dopamine. I needed the serotonin, man. You got to get those endorphins going. Like, these are basically demonic invocations. These are basically barbarous words to most people. They don't fucking know necessarily the science behind what they're saying, but they take it on faith that this is the correct information. That's the worldview. This is the secret name of the feeling that you're feeling. It's like there are certain things about this that are stylistic, I think, more than the actual substance of like what people actually care about.
Brilliant. If we're talking about stealing things, I'm definitely going to steal that one.
Yeah, good one.
Well, yeah, I've been reading some studies about the science of the paranormal and that kind of thing, and there are some people with open minds about these phenomena in the scientific community, and I think that might be, if that's what you're talking about, King, perhaps that we can begin to understand these, at least at the base level, begin to understand, hey, these entities do have some reality. We can't just say they are figments of a sick mind, but they do have reality, and we can actually, in some way, monitor them. We can somehow gauge them using the scientific method or the scientific tools that we have. As far as going back to, as far as the where we're at as a civilization, as a world civilization, I take heart in Kierkegaard's notion of leveling. That we're in an age. He's got a book called The Two Ages, and he talks about the age of leveling, where everything is going to be leveled down to its to its simplest elements. Everything is going to be denuded of meaning, where nothing will have any meaning anymore. And instead of seeing that as a bad thing, we should look at that as a good thing. It will be the beginning of a new cycle. One of his commentators, Alistair Hannay, wrote a book about the public, and in that he talks about the 911 and how 911 was a metaphor for this leveling process, where everything is destroyed and laid bare to its minimal aspects of any type of meaning at all. And but instead of that being a terrible thing, even though it is terrible, it can also be the beginning of something else which is going to come to birth. Now, whether it's like W.B. Yeats talks about, which is what the monster slouching towards Bethlehem or not, is another question. Whether it's the rise of the beast or the Antichrist or whatever mythological entity you want to talk about, it still would be a beginning of a process which will eventuate in a higher awareness. At least I would think new civilizations will be coming to birth with different understandings of these realities.
I just wanted to ask something about that. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and on a larger perspective, it makes perfect sense. But my mind can't grasp this idea of something that's apparently evil, but it's not bad. Like, like 9/11, like if that's an example. Like from a lower level point of view, it's wrong, right? It's wrong, it's evil, and everything else that can be said about that. But then from a bigger perspective, like how you explained it, it was meant to be, it was needed. So my question is, how does the responsibility for doing wrong come into it? Like, for example, the person, let's just say if it was a couple of people or a person that was behind 9/11, are they going to be held accountable or not? Like, is there that responsibility or not? Or does it not really matter in the grand scheme of things? You see, my mind can't grasp that, but if anyone has any ideas to make my mind understand, it would be good.
I think they are. I think that there is individual responsibility. We are responsible for our actions. If we commit evil, we will pay for it.
Yeah,
Either,
so that
if
so
not
that
in this life, in another life, right? That's what I believe.
So it is wrong, like I agree with that. But then if on a bigger perspective it was necessary, would that cancel it out? Or how does that make sense then? How does that make sense then?
I think that necessary is a loaded word because it implies that something has a goal. Like it implies that there was a. It implies that the good that comes out of something was because it was planned to be good in that way before it happened. And I don't know if that's necessarily, at least for me, that's not how I think of it. I think that
So
things can play a beneficial function without being
right,
planned
right.
that way. It can end up being better. Like it can end
Right.
up being better, even if the agents who did the thing weren't intending for that good thing to happen. And
They were
at least
intending evil when they did it.
right, they
Not
Yeah,
accidentally ended up right.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that there's a conflict there because the intention can be I want to do the worst thing I can think of, but even so, there can be something good that comes out of that the phoenix
right.
can rise from the ashes. I always think of the tower. I think of in the tarot. I think of the tower card, and it's funny because I also think of the tower card in relation to 9/11. Like that's what I always think of as the tower. And in the tarot, after the tarot, oh my god, tarot tower. After the tower, which is the like most destructive card in the deck, it's considered to be the one of utter ruination. Like the tower in the tower is collapsing, so it's falling down. Everything that you
Yeah.
thought was a stable structure that's holding you up is not, and it's crumbling, and you're falling, and everything is collapsing and just going to hell. And immediately after that card, the next card in the major arcana is the star, which is that in this leveled out playing field of complete, rubble, you stand in the ruins and look up at the sky, and this bright star is coming out, and it's heralding like out with the old, in with the new. Basically, there's a new future. There's a new possibility in the horizon, and in some way, you're only able to see it because the tower that you were in. If we imagine being inside a tower, maybe you can't even see the sky because you're inside of a building. You can only see that star because this tragedy has opened up the space for it. And I kind of
Right.
think of it like that. It's not necessarily that the destroying the tower was planned. It wasn't necessary in a way that like, oh, that thing just had to go. But because the tower fell, now you can see the star.
Right. So what you're saying is that we can get that same result, but in a better way. Like it's not necessarily for it to happen in the way that it did. I mean, yeah, that would make sense to me. Yeah.
I think so.
Is that what you meant? Like, is that how you kind of meant it?
Yeah.
That we can get to that. We can get to
yeah,
that.
or at least it's not an excuse. Like, yeah, it's not an excuse to do it's not an excuse to do the thing. Like, you shouldn't think, well,
No.
it'll be all right in the end. Might as well just go kill people. You know?
Yeah. So then, that's wrong because it is wrong. It's evil. But we can get to that same point in a better way. Is that what you mean?
It's not exactly what I meant, but I think it's an implication of what I meant. Yeah.
I
Okay.
to that point, what if we're talking about the tower? I always say whenever I was actually doing readings for a bunch of people this weekend, and whenever I give people a reading and they draw the tower, I talk about it in like its place in the cycle of creation and destruction. In that, like, things are going to be created and destroyed always, irregardless of human action. And it's about just identifying those places of destruction that then allow space for creation to occur. And I always say, when I'm like reading for people, yeah, it's a process that's extremely painful. Like, it's not going to be pleasant. Like, just because there is good that comes out of it, it doesn't mean that like you are going to enjoy it. But the process is what's necessary. Like, it's more about the framework rather than the act, in my mind.
Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. So, like, if we took the 9/11 thing, would it have been okay then for the people that were behind it if they didn't do that because their agenda was evil? And if a meteorite fell on the towers, would that have been okay just because it was a natural disaster? Do you know what I mean? Like, my head has a difficult time getting around this kind of concept. I mean, I know evil is evil and wrong is wrong. But then, someone told me evil is evil, wrong is wrong, but there is no evil and there is no good. So things like that make me very confused.
I mean, it's tough because I think part of the issue with evil, especially when we're talking about things like this, especially when we're in systems like Iamblichus, where evil doesn't really make sense from like a theological perspective. We still can personalize it. Like, I know that evil exists because evil has been done to me. So like, I mean, all of this is, I guess, to say, like, it makes sense why that's a very hard circle to square psychologically. Because it's like, I know that evil exists because I've seen it.
Sure.
I don't know if you can say a meteorite is evil, though.
Yeah.
I think
the end result is the same. That's what I'm saying. The end result is the same. So would it?
Right.
But like, how is that
For those
okay?
people who would die, it would be evil. For the families, it would be evil. It would, and evil in the sense of pain and suffering.
Right.
If we think of evil in terms of evil and suffering, I'm sorry, if we think of it in terms of pain and suffering, which is that the right way of thinking about it, or is evil this other metaphysical entity which comprehends not only evil and suffering, but some other type of ominous, insidious.
I would kind of separate pain and evil. I don't know. I would separate, I guess we could say, bad and evil. Like pain, pain can be painful because it's meaning. No, like pain can just be pain that something bad happened. But I wouldn't say that would you say that that's evil? I wouldn't. I don't know. To me, evil is a property of intentions. Evil is something.
I was literally just going to say evil requires intent.
And so we can say, even in a world without evil, there might still be pain, but the pain is just because of just things that can happen to you that are bad. Like, but I don't know. I would maybe separate those things. I don't know.
Well, if I'm a Gnostic, I would believe that is evil. That any pain and suffering in the world is part of an evil entity bringing this upon sentient entities.
Even so, for the Gnostics, though, they would say, why did the why would the meteorite, whatever, in the case that someone gets smushed by a meteorite, why did they get smushed by the meteorite?
Part of
Even then,
harmony, right?
it's not even that the demiurge would throw it's not like the demiurge
Right.
took the meteorite in its tail and threw it at the person and
No, no,
squished
no,
it.
no.
He just made the conditions for people to then get hit by meteorites. Like,
It-
oh, we happen to be imprisoned in this type of world where it's possible to get hit by a meteorite. Even so, the meteorite didn't, know what it was doing.
it's well, it's part of what they would call harmony, which is necessity in a way. It's part of the way of the world that, like you said, the demiurge set it up so that there would be this process which would bring evil upon any entity born into this realm of reality.
Yeah.
So it would still be evil for them. I mean, I don't believe this, but I'm just saying it
Right.
might be possible to think of it as being evil. I do think, though, that Iamblichus does. I definitely don't think that doesn't think that there's evil, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Iamblichus does believe that there's, because the high. I mean, because what he calls the highest reality is the good. So there has to be something, at least I think, in opposition to that, which would be the bad.
Or at least there's like the not good, which I guess you could say
Yeah,
is evil.
yeah.
I
Like
was just going to say,
pure matter.
is that through absence or is that through imposition? I guess.
Absence, I think, because
Yeah,
he talks
I like
about
that's how I read
knowledge.
Iamblichus for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
It's
Because
about
otherwise there would
knowledge.
be, because otherwise there would be demons. Like if the evil were an active force, then there would be something there that's doing it. But if he doesn't, he seems to not acknowledge that there are forces that are actively doing evil. It's like there's a hierarchy and you can be higher
Yeah.
or lower on it. So you're just sort of either you got it or you have more of it or you have less of it.
I do believe there are demons, so just saying.
Yeah, I
So
do. I mean, it's malicious intent. I mean, that's definitely real.
I'm a little bit Iamblichian about it, I gotta say. I think there are things that humans call demons, but I think that I don't know. I think that I don't think that they grow from a different root than anything else. I think it's I don't know. I am a little bit more on the side of evil as an absence. I don't know.
okay.
I mean, I think that if one experiences that, then I think that we are able to come out of it. Like we're able to come out of that dimension or that vibrational, level or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? Like I understand where Iamblichus is coming from, because it's like if you fall into that, you yourself can get out of it. Like you don't have to be stuck there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And I think that's his whole project. I mean, I think that's his whole project is okay,
exactly.
so you can get stuck in that state and then you can come out of it to your normal level of like your human state. But what if the human state is also one of those kinds of funks and you can actually even get out of that and go higher and higher and go one step up to the level of heroes and one step up to the level of daimons and one step up to the level of the gods and then one step up to the level of the one. And then all of this is the bad dream,
Yeah, and I think the trouble is that the people that get stuck there, because I think we can get stuck there.
We can help them, though. Well, hopefully, eventually, when we come back, right? If we
This
go,
is yeah. And this is also completely outside of. This is going to be completely off topic for a second, but I think it's not really that off topic, but it's completely outside of what Iamblichus would talk about. But I think it's interesting if we take this Iamblichus idea that like, okay, we're humans, we're on this level, we're like fallen, we're material, and now we got to climb up the ladder by interacting with progressively more sort of enlightened beings until we get to the top. Like, if you do sort of extend that chain and think, well, then what's lower than humans? If you do kind of say, well, what if there are demons and they're lower than humans? What if there are ghosts and they're lower than humans and they're, more stuck than we are? This does kind of give, in some ways, like a theological justification for a lot of the more ooky spooky side of Western magic with and even stuff that the Greeks and Egyptians were doing, where working with the spirits of the dead or with demons or calling up these creepy things. You can still say that you're doing it with all the love in your heart, because when I tell this ghost to go off some guy, or I tell this demon to go make me $1 million and bring me a harem of sexual slaves. I'm actually helping them. I'm actually helping elevate them because they get a chance to interact with me, who's higher in the chain of being than they are. And
Charles Manson of the spirit world.
exactly. But
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I do know someone actually that can help them to transition, and then he'll be like, do you want to go into the mystery? And then they say yeah, and then he'll take them or he'll help them, and then they go, and they're fine, they're happy.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't. They're like nope, and they go the other direction. But a lot of them do.
You're
Yeah.
talking about the ghosts or the spirits?
It depends on what appears. They can be different entities. They can be ghosts. They can even be demons. Actually, that actually agree to go. They can be ghosts. It just depends on what he's interacting with.
I think
So,
among some, I mean, not to be a broken record, but I think among some Buddhists, it's even common to like say mantras and things like that to pets and animals that one might have, in hopes that they get born into a higher state, because animals are considered like lower on the rung than humans. So they might say that in hopes that they get like a better rebirth, better luck next time.
right. Interesting.
Right. I think that's interesting. Like bringing it back to Iamblichus, then, like if humans are the lowest on the ladder, what about everything else in the world? What about other life that is not able, or as far as we know, anyways, that is not able to use their rational faculties in order to, ascend, or like that would, I guess what I'm saying is that would support that idea that maybe there is a theological justification for evil as a entity rather than as an absence. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, and even animals. What about animals? What about just anything, anything other than humans? It does seem maybe like he just stopped at humans for rhetorical reasons and not because his analysis actually stopped at humans.
Well, he does think that all things are interconnected. In fact, I wanted to get to that passage, but I think we might not want to do it this time. The almost the second, what is it? The third to last paragraph in chapter 5, where he talks about the diamonds, and this goes back to Ryan's question earlier about how do the diamonds do it, and how are we going to get to the point where Iamblichus starts explaining how we can get in contact with them and then begin making our ascent. That paragraph talks about this notion of cosmic sympathy, and it's a carryover of Plotinus, but it's putting it into the perspective. This is basically an encapsulation of the Chaldean way of thinking of the other reality. But I think we should save it for next time and then look at chapter 6 after that. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Well, this has been very, very exhilarating. I thank you, everyone, for coming, and I look forward to next week.
I appreciate to know I'm not the only one that believes in demons, so.
Not at all.
Oh yeah! By the end of this discussion, we'll be by the end of in a few more weeks, we'll be speaking in tongues.
Yeah,
Oh, my
right.
goodness.
Yeah. Well, my
I
partner,
wish.
my partner's got some like, she's a pious Muslim, and she sometimes is a little bit frightened by the sort of stuff I do in my recreational times. Let's not hope we go too far, or at least for her sanity.
Yay. Yes, for sure.
But yeah, appreciate it, guys. This is a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And I'll put this up for recording.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.